This is the unfiltered truth about entrepreneurship. Raw, no BS, no sugarcoating. Welcome to Entrepreneur Intel. I'm your host, Wes Matthews. Each episode, we'll learn from experienced founders and uncover the top 5% learnings that led to their success in all things personal, family, and business. This show is sponsored by Stealth Consulting, delivering clear marketing strategies, ROI, and no surprises. So I'm super excited to have the guests on today's podcast. Introducing our guest today, he is a serial entrepreneur. He has written 4 number-one best-selling books on Amazon. He is a global keynote speaker and growth strategy coach. Mike spends his days advising CEOs from both Fortune 100s and startups on how to create the teams and products that change the world. Welcome, Mike Maddock. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Wes. Nice to be with you.
So happy you're here. Lots of questions for you. Excited to dive in. But I got to ask you first, your companies, you have a long track record of being a successful entrepreneur, 33 years to be exact. You've had headcount up to 100 team members in some of your companies. What's the most important lesson you've learned thus far on your journey?
I would say that my friend Marshall Goldsmith said, "What got you here won't get you there." He wrote a book about it. And I think that lesson, that your superhero power, your greatest strength, is also tied to your greatest weakness or your greatest blind spot. And the sooner you realize what those two things are and surround yourself with people that can, take care of that blind spot, the better.
Now you have an incredible journey. I mean, 33 years, that's a lot of time being an entrepreneur. I'm sure you have multiple businesses, just a different type of experience across your journey. What got you down the path of becoming an entrepreneur, going off on your own?
Well, I was lucky because everyone that I worked for in high school and then in college was an entrepreneur. And in a lot of ways, I got to look behind the curtain. I saw how messy and scary and ugly and wonderful it was to run a company. And I also saw that you didn't have to be perfect. All these entrepreneurs, these great craftsmen, were flawed. And I remember I had a job in high school working at a luxury apartment or condominium building in Chicago. And it was, rich people were building out entire floors, and I was a laborer. So they had master carpenters working, the best of the best. And I remember hearing one day a litany of swear words when this woodworker had miscut a piece of walnut, the 20-foot board of walnut, and he cut it wrong. And he swore up and down. And my takeaway was, wow, that's the best carpenter in Chicago. And he made a mistake, but he kept going. It was a great lesson for me. Entrepreneurs, what's the Phil Knight? My big takeaway from Phil Knight Shoe Dog: just keep going, which is a wonderful piece of advice that every entrepreneur should hear from another entrepreneur.
So what was your first business venture? Like what did you start your career with early on?
Well, so I needed money in my pocket as a kid and to pay for gas to go on dates. So I cut lawns and I shoveled snow, and I realized pretty early on that I could sell the next house and the next house and the next house and get my friends to help me, shovel the driveways or whatever. So that was my first taste of entrepreneurship. In college, I had a greeting card company and then a little design firm. And out of school, I started a company called Maddock Douglas with Wes Douglas, my first business partner. And we grew that company up to about 100 people. It went from being a design firm to a marketing strategy firm to an innovation consulting firm over the years.
So what years does that company take you to? Like how many years did you run that company?
It's still around today, but I started it in 1991. I remember the tagline, our first tagline should have been, "Sure, we can do that too," because I would just take anything. Do you do logos? Of course we do logos. You do advertisements? Of course we do advertisements. Brochures? Why not? And any work that we could get, we would just figure out how to do it. And then eventually I had this epiphany that advertising and marketing were taxes you paid for bad ideas. So I'll say that again. advertising and marketing are a tax you pay for a bad idea, which is to say that as social media became a thing, if you came up with something that solved a real problem, people would tell each other about it, and you had to pay less and less to get the word out. So we pivoted at Maddock Douglas from being about marketing and advertising, and more about being about research to find gaps in the market, inventing a new product or a service or business model that solved a real need. And then we could market or advertise it, but we had to do less of that because it solved a real problem.
I noticed that you have, Fortune 100 companies. I mean, did you split your company into we're gonna go after large enterprise companies and entrepreneurial companies? Or, like, at some point, did you make a decision, or do you serve both of those markets?
When we pivoted to be about innovation, we bought a research firm called Marketecture out of Connecticut, and I remember in our company we had a theme for a year: make the vapor go away. We had this really honest conversation about what we were really good at and what we didn't know how to do. And one of the things we didn't understand really was how to do great research, qualitative and quantitative research. And as soon as we figured out how to find gaps in the market and size them, we could make a really compelling case in boardrooms that mattered about, you know, that there was a gap in the market that was worthy of a $300 million new product or service minimum, and that we would deliver. We would find that gap, come up with a product, and help them launch it, or the project was free. And it was quite a compelling
Oh, wow.
guarantee. And one day we were working with the plumber down the street, and the next day we were on the phone with General Mills and Kellogg's and Kraft and Nationwide Insurance and Allstate Insurance and Transamerica. And so it became, we very quickly went from working with very small companies to being in the boardroom. We also stopped working. We were working with the CEO because it turned out that when you're launching a new product or service, that's the visionary's job. And that's typically the CEO. It starts with the CEO and moves down. So it's quite a shift for us.
How did you think about that concept of doing all of that hard work for essentially free if it didn't work, right? Or you as an entrepreneur, you're responsible, you're on the hook for your team, your people. I mean, was it just you and a partner, so it was your time, or how did you architect that model?
Well, people that are way smarter than me told me stories about guarantees. And if you could find a guarantee, something that a promise that you could make and get behind, that people would trust you more, it would become easier to sell. So I remember hearing the story of the scooter store, which is a wheelchair, electric wheelchair store. And their guarantee was they took the number one issue, which was insurance, and said, look, if we say we can get you covered by insurance and we can't, we will give you the wheelchair for free. We will give you your scooter for free. And what the reason they could make that guarantee is because they became experts in understanding how to qualify for insurance. And that expertise allowed them to write a 10-point questionnaire. And if you got those questions right, they could, they would say, we'll get you insurance. If you didn't, they wouldn't take you on as a customer. So that was the guarantee. They never had to give away a scooter because they really understood what the questions were. We knew that we could find a $300 million gap in the market. We did our homework. We still can today. We knew that we could align that with a customer and a brand where you had the right to launch this and people would buy it. We could prove that they would buy it, and we could prove how much they would spend for it. Ultimately, what would happen is most companies won't launch a new product or service because of their own stuff. It has nothing to do with, having the idea. Having the idea is easy. Getting it through the meat grinder, the sausage machine, is really hard. And most companies lack the courage or the will to actually do that because most companies are designed to mitigate risk, not take it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, like, was that your only business at the time, or did you have some other activity going behind the scenes? Because I'm just kind of hypothesizing the life cycle, the sales cycle of something like that. Like, talk to me about the time frame of something like that. I'm curious around that.
Yeah, so that type of project takes about 6 months to do. So, and what was interesting is that our average engagement went from about $50,000 to probably $500,000. We added a zero. And what I didn't see, and it was really hard, it was kind of like skiing moguls, but they got bigger and bigger and bigger. If you missed one, if you missed a client, or, there was a gap you had to have a pretty big team to do that kind of work. And if you missed a project or it got delayed, it put a tremendous strain on overhead. It's just a good lesson as an entrepreneur. If I could start all over in life, I'd make recurring revenue businesses instead of becoming a professional whale hunter, because it's hard to chase whales all over the ocean.
I love recurring revenue. You and I share, I read an article in Inc. Uh, interesting. Seven signs that your forum isn't delivering value, I think it is. But we have a connection because we're both affiliated with EO Entrepreneur Organization. I think you're also part of YPO, which is
Yeah.
similar, just more zeros at the end of the number. So you have a lot of experience with entrepreneurs. Talk a little bit about, and this kind of ties into your 4 best-selling books on Amazon, which is pretty amazing because Amazon to me is this big ocean of content, things, and items. So for you to be able to have best-selling, that's pretty cool. Talk a little bit about, like, when did you start writing books? What are the topics of those books, and how did you ultimately become a 4-time best-selling author on Amazon?
Well, so since you brought up EO, I'll bring up my friend Vern Harnish, who's the founder of EO. And he got in my ear many years ago and said, Mike, you got to write a book. You got to write a book. You got to write a book, Mike. And the reason he said that was because if you write a book, you have to do the work and you become an instant expert. People just assume you know what you're talking about when you write a book. Ultimately, you kind of do have to know what you're talking about to write a book. The first book I wrote was called Brand New: Solving the Innovation Paradox. And the innovation paradox is the harder we try to innovate, the worse we get at it. And so the whole book was deconstructing what happens when you put pressure on a team and say, we have to change everything, and what to do about it, what you can do to keep the train rolling smoothly down the track. It has a lot to do with design thinking. The second book was called Free the Idea Monkey, to focus on what matters most. Free the Idea Monkey is about the tension between an idea monkey and a ringleader, an operator and a visionary, and how to keep a team in balance. The third book was called Flirting with the Uninterested, which it describes my dating career in college, and also talks about how large companies often tell their customers what they want instead of listening to what they need. It's about selling, specifically insurance. You need it, you need it, you need it, instead of going, what do you actually need? And then the fourth book is called Plan D, and it's about disruptors, business disruptors, and specifically the 7 superhero powers that my friends who are business disruptors use to pivot and to change industries and businesses.
So what are some of your learnings from that, right? So you're a successful entrepreneur. Vern Harnish shakes you, says you have to write a book. I think a lot of entrepreneurs might have that seed in the back of their head, right? Like, what would this do? What type of impact? I mean, I think myself as an entrepreneur, you have a lot of head trash, right? Like, who cares about my book? Who am I? Who's gonna read it? What were the emotions like? And then after, like, is there some big things that changed or that you saw from, whether it was your effort or time you put into that, or what are some big things that you noticed from that experience?
Well, so nobody makes money writing books. Hard stop, which is an exaggeration. Very few people make money writing books. And my intention wasn't to make money writing books. My intention was to understand a topic and have something to say in front of clients or on stages. And so what happened was I wrote a book. People started to come ask me to speak about the book, which it turns out that all those detentions I got in grade school at St. Joseph's Catholic school in Homewood, because I talked too much and doodled too much, turned into a career. I get paid to talk and doodle on stage. So I know how to talk. And people would invite me to be on stage and talk about things. And that led to bigger and bigger stages, and it led to engagement. So it was really, and the reason Vern said you need to write a book is because there's no better business card than a book. Um, I think it's some takeaways from writing a book. I think number one, you can't write one book in one sitting. You have to write an outline and then write articles that eventually will become a book. Write a little bit at a time. It's like you can't eat a whole side of beef at once, one plate at a time. Number two, and this is something that my friend Mike McCallowitz shared with me, who's written some wonderful books. And a lesson I'm trying to learn still. Most great business books are about one singular idea, and it's usually in the headline. Good to Great, The Power of Habit. If you think about your favorite business book, I bet you the headline is the topic, and every chapter is about that one thing. And if you can find one thing that might feel like a cliche, but it's true, all cliches are cliches because they're true, and write about it in a way that makes people go, wow. And there's a one singular takeaway, you've written a good book.
No, that's really good feedback. One that stands out in my mind is Dan Sullivan, right? 10x is easier than 2x. Like that sentence sums up, what that book is. But you and I share experience around EO, and I think one of the big parts of EO and YPO are forums, right? And I think as an entrepreneur, if you're aware of what a forum is, great, keep doing it, and your article might add a lot of value. But to entrepreneurs that aren't familiar with what a forum, I mean, forum completely changed my life. But you'd written an article for Inc., which is awesome in and of itself. But interesting that 7 signs that your forum is not delivering. Like, talk a little bit about that, and what inspired you to write that, and what does it all mean?
Yeah. So I have been involved in an EO forum and a YPO forum. My EO forum for 23 years now, my YPO forum for 15 years, and they're both my second forum. Some of my best friends in life started in peer groups and forums. And, I've had some personal tragedy in my life, and my forum mates literally carried me. They made me a better father, a better husband, a better friend, and a better business person when I had trouble getting out of bed in the morning. So I have mad love for forum. I think every CEO has blind spots, and a CEO's job is to deal with those blind spots. So if you are in a peer group, here are 7 ways to know that you're not getting the most out of your peer group. The first one is that everyone goes to the same church or the same bathroom. So my favorite saying is you can't read the label when you're sitting inside the jar. And what contributes to that means our expertise gets in the way. We know what works. We know what we can afford. We know what we've tried in the past. We know what our customer needs. We know. And a peer group, the right peer group, should be able to look at you and say, you're missing something. But if everybody is in the same religion or goes to the same bathroom, there are intrinsic blind spots that you just can't get away from. My friend Dave Liefeld works for a company, and they have Christian men's group peer groups, and he's a coach. And when he was going through the interview process, he said, I don't think Jesus would be able to get into one of these groups, which I thought was funny. So that's the first thing. You all go to the same church or the same bathroom. The second way you know that your peer group isn't delivering for you is that haven't you heard this presentation before? You keep hearing the same presentations again and again and again. It might be you who keeps coming out with the same presentation, or one of your forum mates. That's a sign that you're stuck. And it's a sign that there's this axiom in design thinking that if you keep working on the same problem over and over and over again, and you can't fix it, you're probably working on the wrong problem. You need a forum or a peer group that sees your problems differently than you do. If they don't, you'll be stuck, and they won't be able to get you unstuck. So the diversity of thinking in a peer group, is critical. It's why I started Flourish Advisory Boards, but I'll talk about that later. No, I'll talk about it now. I think that every peer group should have at least 6 different types of lenses. There should be an operator, there should be a strategist, there should be a rainmaker, there should be a visionary, a tech futurist, and an orchestrator. You can test to understand what is the lens a CEO sees things through. But when you have all 6 of those lenses in a group, you'll get unstuck much more quickly. Does that make sense, Wes?
So my experience with my forum and just being around EO, like I love what you're saying right now because it makes perfect sense to me. I was talking to a client the other day and they want to hire an EOS implementer because there's like 4 visionaries in a room. So what did they do? They started interviewing visionary coaches. And I said, the last thing you need is another visionary in a room full of visionaries. Like you need to find the biggest integrator coach to help you because you guys are just kind of crazy. So your concept of the flourish advisory on the 6 different lenses, it's fascinating because you talk about your company filling this big void. I see forum as the same thing where now you have 6 different perspectives and people aren't stepping on toes and you're going to get that full 360 perspective on any problem, personal, family, business, or whatever the case. I'm fascinated with it. Like you've taken it to another level, which I think is pretty awesome.
Oh, thanks. Well, and it's a great segue because the third way you know that your forum isn't delivering for you is that everyone's a hammer looking for a nail. And so my own personal experience, I mentioned that I got a company up to about 100 people. We did. It wasn't me, it was us. And we're 20 million in revenue. And then we're 18, then we're 16, then we're 15. And I'm like, what is happening? And it's out of desperation. I brought in a coach who tested all the people around the table. And I was shocked to find that everyone except for our CFO was a quick start on Colby. In other words, we were all about pivoting. And under pressure, or when we were having the best day of our lives, we wanted to invent something new. So even when we found a winning formula, we didn't want to execute on that. We just wanted to reinvent ourselves, which explained why we were so good at innovation, so good at figuring out things for our clients that were different, but really not good at executing and follow through and system and processes. And I was blind to it because you know what? I loved all these people. They laughed at my jokes. They were like me. And but I didn't
Yeah.
see it until we did that test. The
And
next
and
way
how much did
is that
Forum, like how much did Forum open your eyes to that, right? Like, I have my own personal experience where I remember meeting my Forum and I'm like, "There's all these problems happening around me, and I don't know what's going on." They're all, like, looking at me like, "Yeah, dude, like, you're the problem." And I finally came to
yeah,
grips to I'm a quick start, I'm a visionary, and I realized, man, I'm causing a lot of these problems, and I have to get out of the way. So it's really cool that you figured that out, right, in your journey.
yeah. So the example that I use just to bring this home, I said there were 6 lenses. So if I came and said, "Oh my gosh, we're not profitable, what are we going to do?" And I had 6 of those types of people, the operator would say, "Let me see your P&L. I'll punish it. You'll be profitable in 2 weeks, I promise you." The strategist would say, "Well, how are you measuring? I mean, are you measuring lagging indicators, leading indicators? Maybe we should change your KPIs around." The rainmaker will say, "What's your pipeline like? Maybe you're not charging enough. Maybe you need to 80/20 your pipeline." The visionary, us, we'd go, "We need to reinvent our company. We need to buy somebody. We need something completely new. We're not profitable because we're no longer relevant." Uh, the 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 tech futures would say something like, let's maybe our tech stack is wrong. Let's bring in, AI and have the robots make us better. And then the orchestrator would say, well, maybe it's about trust. Maybe we have a culture issue. We're not holding each other accountable. And the question is, who's right? And the answer is they're all right. Everybody's right at a different moment in time. But unless you have all of those lenses to see your challenges through, you're going to just keep being you're the hammer looking for a nail. And for us visionaries, we just want to reinvent stuff. I'm a great starter. I'm a lousy finisher. I need a great operator to go, "What's fine?" Walt Disney needs Roy Disney.
That's really awesome. I mean,
So
that's really cool. I mean, to be able to see that, is really cool. So what does that process look like? I mean, is it do you take 6 random entrepreneurs and just kinda group them together like the Real World show and, like, let's see what happens, or what does that look?
No, no, I actually it's a really difficult business model because it's like playing Tetris. First, I have a pipeline of people who are like, I need a group. I need a turnkey advisory board. Most of them have been in peer groups and they've outgrown a peer group and they're looking for something, to go to the next level or find a new tribe. Um, many of my many of my members are in a lot of peer groups. They're just looking for a different type of peer group. So I use the Colby to understand which of the 6 seats they run to when they're having the best day of their lives or retreat to when they're having the worst day of their lives. It's the same seat. Most entrepreneurs or CEOs or P&L owners can do 2 of those seats really well. And then I start putting together groups where there's at least one person in each of the seats, and they're in the same zip code in terms of employee count and revenue. Um, and then every group has a professional moderator and a professional executive coach. I moderate a number of groups. I don't take on coaching clients anymore because I'm too busy, but I actually do have a couple of seats open in a couple of my groups. Um, and it's awesome just being in the middle of those folks who have these panacea moments because things they've been stuck on for a long time are finally being viewed through a different lens than, um, the they see the world.
No, that's really cool. Alright, I'll get you back on track. What's number 4? I took you off course there a little bit.
It's so good. Number 4 is that you give more value than you get for years. A peer group is like a savings account. You come every month and you give and you're attentive and you're present and um and you're putting money into a savings account. You're like that's building equity and trust with the people around the room. And oftentimes your life is going great. You don't need help. But when you do, if you've been putting that um if you've been investing in the group, you're going to be able to make a huge withdrawal. That's something that I learned when my wife got sick. I needed those people to help me, and they were there for me. If you give and give and give for years, and it feels like you're always giving and never getting, you may have outgrown your group.
That's interesting. We have, so just from my perspective on forum, so for me, what I see when I talk about forum mates or forum group, for us, it's that top 5%, bottom 5%, the good stuff,
Right.
the great, but then also the worst of the worst, right? So your top 5%, bottom 5%, personal, family, business. We kind of have it's not like a running joke in our forum, but you've been through a lot in your own life. In our forum, there's been a lot, right? And it typically moves from guy to guy. We kind of have this thing. He's like, I mean, there was a period where he's like, man, I'm glad it's not me this month. But he's like, I know my
Yeah.
time's coming. But it's been one of those things where I think so for people to understand that, if you're an entrepreneur, being around like-minded individuals that are like to your comment of the same zip code, you're going through life, personal, family, business of people that are doing similar things as you, experiencing the same stuff. So like it's a phenomenal outlet, life changing.
Yeah. I often tell people that don't be ashamed when you're having a really bad year or month, or when you're having a really good month, because you feel bad. Like, I'm killing it, man. I am absolutely landing the plane. I am killing it. And the guy right after the guy before you presented in tears because their
Yep.
company's about on the verge of bankruptcy. And what I say to folks is, just be patient because entrepreneurship is like a roller coaster and you just never know. I mean, look at what happened during COVID. Some people's businesses got just hammered, devastated. And some people are like, this is the best thing that's ever happened in my business. It was just luck of the draw. Um, 2 years later, the other businesses are doing well. So that's number one. Number two, the thing about a peer group for P&L owners is who do you talk to? You can't go to the neighborhood barbecue or a family reunion and go, man, I have to
Right.
figure out a comp model for my executive team. Or, geez, I have to, how am I going to fire my best friend? Because these are first world problems. to these people. Oh, look, the business owner wants some advice. That must be really rough. Well, it is rough, and
Yeah.
you need a group to talk to. The crown is very heavy.
Yeah, it's really good. Really good stuff. All right, so that's number 4. What's number 5?
Number 5 is daddy won't let me do it. It's critically important not to have victims in a peer group. If you're a P&L owner, you need to be surrounded by people that can pull the levers of the machine and make things happen. And I've literally been in groups where a member or members would come and complain about how their father or their mother, who really was running the business, wouldn't let them do anything in the business. And it is maddening being around someone that complains but can't create. And those people can't be in a good peer group. They can't. That's any questions? Have you ever had that experience? Come on, admit it. I want names.
That's good. That's good.
No comment. No
No
comment.
comment. Yeah.
Well, I had that experience, and I remember early days in EO. I was so excited to be with a group of entrepreneurs who were like changing the world, and had the keys to the castle and could drive the car in any metaphor you want. They could take it anywhere they wanted to go. And then being shocked to be in a group with people that were complaining because they felt powerless, and they were. And I thought to myself, then why are you in this group? And I wasn't being mean. I just wanted to have
Yeah.
conversations with people that could put ideas on the ground.
Yeah, that was kind of one of the things that led me to EO was just having, you had to be the founder, you had to, start the company, because up until I think I joined EO in 2014, and up until that point, I'm like, man, I didn't know this existed. Like, this is unreal because everything that led up to that point was, it might be a salesperson that's part of this company or family company. And it's never the same type of relationship, right? From entrepreneur to entrepreneur. My
Yeah,
forum my
I like,
forum, like, there's more zeros on some of the, some of the members, right? But what I notice is the problems are all still there. It's just different level of variation of those problems.
and that's going to happen when you're in a group for 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Some members are going to have explosive growth. Some will be on their 3rd or 4th company. But having someone who can empathize with where you've been and really cares about your success and is willing to tell you that your baby is ugly is
Mhm.
critically important.
Yep. Yeah, I had an experience where I sold a company and I kinda didn't listen to the feedback, right? I kinda went to it like this, and
Yeah.
a certain amount of months happened, and 2 of my forum mates were looking at me like, "Yeah, we told you that this is exactly
Yeah.
what was gonna happen?"
Gestalt is difficult. So, like, for people listening, the Gestalt protocol, which I think is awesome, is that you share experience, not advice. And the way that looks is if I tell you, Wes, you should do this, you got to do this, or you're going to really regret it. And if you do it and it blows up in your face, you're going to be mad at me. If you don't do it and it blows up in your face, I'm going to be mad at you. But if I say something like, well, Wes, something similar happened to me, and here's what I did, and it blew up in my face. So I just want to share that with you because I wish on the look back I'd handled it differently. You can't be mad at me for sharing my experience, and you can do whatever you want with it. And so, as much as possible, I think sharing experience rather than advice should be the protocol. And it's another way to say it is don't shit on me, don't shit all over me. Um, it's really hard because we run businesses and we're used to saying, no, here's what you need to do.
Right.
But in a peer group, the moderator needs to try to control that as much as possible. And that is number 6. You're in the wrong peer group if it's a goat rodeo. And a goat rodeo means that there's no agenda, there's no controls, people are interrupting, every meeting is different, yada, yada, yada. And I believe that a great advisory board, a great peer group needs a chairman, needs a professional moderator, someone that can be a benevolent dictator. My friend Mickey Williams, she ran Vistage Group for years and she let me sit in on a couple. And I remember her telling me, I'm a benevolent dictator. These people all run their own companies. I love them. And if I let them, they would run each other out of the room. So I decide what they're going to talk about. I decide when we're going to stop. I decide. And it's been my experience that, guess what? CEOs really like that. Their time is incredibly valuable. They want things to be run in an orderly way. They're okay with when, can I say something? No, not
Yeah.
yet, because we got to get through this. They appreciate it. And one of the flaws of, in my experience, EO and YPO forums is that they're member led, which means the moderator is a volunteer. We're busy. It's not their job. And so oftentimes you get a goat rodeo when you really want a peer group.
It's a good visual. It makes sense.
It's, you've been to a goat rodeo, right?
Oh, yeah, sometimes I live it. But I do like, for me, the gestalt or like speaking from experience has changed my life because I'm a visionary. And before I learned that, right, somebody would have a problem and I'd feel like a hero, right? Like, oh, I've got the smoking gun. I've got the answer, right? And now, like, after learning, it's like, man, I can't tell you what's good for you. Like, alls I can do is speak from experience. You make the decision. You've got to live with the decision. And if I can't speak intelligently from the experience, maybe I know somebody that could help that had an experience. Otherwise, just keep my mouth shut and I don't have to get involved. I mean, it really changed my life. Sometimes my wife or my kids get mad because they're like, can you just tell me? And I'm like, no, like I don't know what's good for you. Like, let's talk it through. Like, they hate that I speak from experience here, but I think one day they'll appreciate it. They'll
Yeah,
come around.
it's very hard to do when you're an idea monkey. You're just like, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? My big moment was when we were studying the drama triangle, and David Emerald was teaching our executive team. And I come from a background where there was a lot of addiction in my family, and I don't like enablers. I never want to think myself as an enabler or a rescuer, another word for it, Dave's word for it. And I triggered thinking that I was rescuing people. And then it occurred to me that I rescued with ideas that, people were waiting for what's the idea? What's the idea? And that was creating real dysfunction. Being able to go, what do you think the idea is? Have you heard of the 131 framework?
I have not, no.
I love this. Jamil Nazim shared this with me. He picked it up at Harvard. 131 framework. Just imagine someone comes in to your office and they're complaining about something. And you say, well, listen, let's have lunch next Friday and we'll 131 it. So next Friday, go to lunch. But what's your 131? One, here's how I see the issue. Three, here's three ways that we could possibly solve this issue. And here's what I recommend as a solution. That's awesome because you're don't complain, 131 it. Okay. They're framing the issue. They may see it differently than you do. They come up with three solutions. They may come up with different solutions than you would, and they have a recommendation. Now, you don't need to take any of those, but at least you've been enlightened and you've created a culture where people are leading with ideas instead of complaints. So it's a great framework for
Yeah,
people that have lots of ideas.
that's an interesting framework. That's a really interesting framework. Me, I had
Yeah.
something similar with Dan Sullivan, I love his books, his trilogy of books. But there's something that I learned through Strategic Coach, which is called the impact filter, which is
Tell me
it's
more.
really helped my
Yeah.
company and helped me because I think as a visionary quick start, everything makes perfect sense in my brain. But until you try to like explain what you're asking out of somebody, right? Then they do it and you're like, this isn't what I thought. And this impact filter document's a really nice way to communicate. So when you mentioned that, I quickly thought of that impact filter. Uh,
I
no,
know
that's really cool.
Dan,
So like,
and I'm not,
oh,
I'll go
nice.
looking for that. Thank you for that.
Oh, impact filter completely changed my life. So like, I always recommend EO to anybody that'll listen and an impact filter because I think as a visionary, just again, to your six lenses, people communicate differently and you need to like all look at it from a different perspective. So what is Flourish Advisory? Is that the name of the company?
Yeah, Flourish advisory boards. And if you're curious
Okay.
about what seat you might be in, which of the 6 lenses your leadership style sees challenges through, if you go to the site, it'll ask you to answer 10 questions and it'll tell you which of the 6 seats you sit in. So it's about a 30-second 10 question. And then if you send me a note, I'll interpret your results and tell you what your superhero power is, and importantly, what your Achilles heel is that's tied to that superhero power.
So so just to confirm, it's www.flourishadvisoryboards.com, and they can go on and take a
That's
test, an
correct.
assessment.
That's right. Yeah.
Um,
It'll pop up when you
which
right on the homepage.
which brings me to my next piece is you're a speaker. You're a polished guy, have a lot of experience. Like, what do you like to speak on? What's a good format for you? I mean, there's a lot of people that reach out all the time, like, hey, we're looking for good speakers. What's sort of your, this is the best of the best when it comes to speaking?
Yeah, I've been speaking lately about the questions disruptors ask themselves. I think there are, the greatest leaders ask the best questions, and I've spent a lot of time in rooms with leaders that are way smarter, way more accomplished than I am. And really, I just took notes about the questions they were asking themselves and their teams. I wrote Plan D, which is about disruptors, and it leads to some good conversations. If you think about the questions you could ask yourself if you want to change the way your business is perceived, you're perceived, et cetera.
No, that's really cool, Mike.
So
Yeah, I could talk to you all day, for entrepreneur to entrepreneur, but we've got the Flourish Advisory Boards. If somebody wants to reach out to you, whether it's for speaking or more about your books or just to connect with you, maybe for an opportunity or whatever the case is, what's the easiest way that somebody can get in contact with you?
So the easiest way is just a personal email, because my assistant looks at them and she'll make sure we get on a calendar. It's mike@maddock.com. And
And that's
I answer all my emails. So
Maddo. That's Maddock is Maddock, correct?
that's correct. Yeah. Mike
Awesome.
at mike-maddock.com.
Well, awesome, Mike. I really appreciate the time. A lot of nuggets today. I really appreciate it. And hopefully people reach out to you and talk about this advisory board forum. It's really awesome what you're doing.
I love it. My purpose is to connect people in possibility. So it makes me feel really strong helping put 2 people together that can put a bigger dent in the universe. And Wes, just because I know there's an OCD person listening to this, the 7th way to know that you're not getting what you need out of your peer group is that everybody gets along. There's I call it a partner paradox, where if you get along really well with your partner or your forum all the time, they're probably too much like you. I've run Gathering of Titans out at MIT, which is an entrepreneurial conclave, 5 or 6 times, I believe, which means I've had to go out and get 15 speakers for each one of these gatherings. And then for years, every year I'd look at the comments on the speakers and how they were rated. And I get really bummed if everyone didn't get like a 10 or a 9. And then I realized something. It was the people that half the room hated and half the room loved that created the greatest impact. Because when you hear something you don't like, it's picking a scab. There's something, it's like the sand in the oyster that creates the pearl. And so if you have a group that you meet with every month and you love everything they say, you get along famously with everyone, you're in the wrong group. If you have a business partner that you're holding hands and everything is just wonderful, you have the wrong business partner. You need people that are going to challenge you and make you feel uncomfortable. That's how growth happens. And that's the 7th way to know that you're in the wrong peer group.
That's really cool. I did not have the opportunity to meet you at EMP, which I did at MIT. So I know what you're saying. There was a time where one of the speakers that came in, half the room got up and walked out.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm just like, I'm curious. Like, I love people's perspective. I wanted to hear it. But what got the juices and the discussions going was now somebody had a stance, or they started to talk about why they were so upset, and that's what I thought got
Yeah.
interesting. Like, I think to be an entrepreneur, like, you have to, like, love the tension and love the chaos. Because yeah, I totally agree with you. When it's kumbaya all the time, it's like, yeah, something's not right here, you know?
I remember calling one of my mentors, Rick Voren, and complaining about Jack Welch. And at the time, I just finished working on the advisory board for GE, and I saw him on TV, and he really rubbed me the wrong way because it seemed to me that his values were not aligned with mine. And my mentor said, Mike, you need to learn how to judge the medicine, not the vessel.
That's really good.
Yeah, and I didn't
That's
like
really
it,
good.
but he was correct.
That's awesome. Well, Mike, one more time. What's your email one more time, and we'll let you go.
It's Mike at Mike-Maddock, Maddock.com. Wes, thanks. It's been a
Yeah, I
real
recommend
pleasure.
I recommend reaching out to Mike. I think your concept's amazing and everything you do. So thank you so much for spending the time. I really appreciate it. This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Thank you for joining us. For show notes or other episodes, please visit us at entrepreneurintel.com. Until next time.